Okay, welcome back everyone. This is MrCati. In today's report, I'm going to be covering, of course, as you can see here before you, these key dates. I'm going to be discussing them in a build-up to a final chart. So I'm going to build on this, but I'm building for a reason because there's some things you need to see and be aware of before you get to the final chart. Now, ever since these dates have been shown to us in crop circles and in other ways, I started to think, because of the way that I think, that it was very highly probable that these key dates, because of the way we've been shown it in the crop circles, 9/21, 9/23, 9/24, that there could be some further subcode in this combination of numbers. And my suspicions were proven true. I took a look at this layout and I'm showing it to you here before you. So let me get with it and explain to you what's in this image. I merely took the date, which of course 9 is for September, of course. But let's leave 9 out of the equation for the moment. And let's just deal with these 6 digits, which are 2 digits for every date shown. 21, 23, 24. 21, of course, adds to 3. 23 adds to 5. 24 adds to 6. Now 3 and 5 is 8. 8 and 6 is 14. Now, 14 is in green because this is the total for all 3 numbers. Okay? And 14, to me, is indicative of the Queen, the royal cabal, the Queen's criminal gang. Now, it's highlighted in green along with 21, and you're going to see this in the final chart. And by doing it this way, you're going to see that it highlights 9/23, 9/24. Now, we know this already for the fact that it's when Pope Francis meets with Obama. 24th is when Pope Francis addresses the U.S. Congress. Both days, Pope Francis and Obama are in Washington, D.C., in a ritually created five-sided area, Pentagon area, that encompasses Baltimore. It encompasses Baltimore, where the current Baltimore riots are taking place. It incorporates Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, where the Pope's going to visit, and New York City, the site of the Twin Towers 9/11 false flag event that occurred in 2001. Now, the fact that all of those locations are within a special zone, an area created over ancient time by Jesuits and their influence, leads me to believe a number of things. But before I get to that, I need to show you why I believe what I believe. Now, I knew that these dates possibly contained hidden code, and it does. Now, aside from the 356, which adds to 14, that covers the Queen and the 21 number, I then noted by looking at this arrangement that 9 and 3 adds to 12, 9 and 5 adds to 14, and this is a second way of making 14, please note. 9 and 6 would be 15. Now, I know that 9 and 14, because when I discovered it under the 356 combination, 14 and 9 adds to 23. Now this is very important. But having discovered that 9 plus these numbers create these 3 sets of numbers, I then added them back to the 9 and produced 9/21. 9 and 12 is 21. 9 and 14 is 23. And 9 and 15 is 24. Now, I show you this because in this, the key date that's in this code that I just showed you, because of the 14 and the 2 ways that it can be shown, this 14 and 9 adds to 23. And 23 is one of the 2 key dates that have been highlighted for us to be aware of. Now, with that being said, let me show you chart number 2. Okay, chart number 2. Because of the first chart that highlighted 3 dates, 21, 23, 24, and because I found or discovered that 14, the total of all 3 dates, highlights 21, because 21 does associate with the Queen and the Royals, and I'm going to show that in the final chart. And because I knew that it possibly, that 9/21, 9/23, 9/24 was a possible subcode element, I found the subcode. And of course, by doing that, I then realized that 9/23, 9/24 should be segmented. And by segmenting these 2 numbers from the 9/21, I realized that these two numbers also provide me with a subcode, a very important subcode to consider and to observe. 2 and 3 adds to 5. 2 and 4 adds to 6. 5 plus 6 equals 11. Ergo 911. Now, when I saw this, for me, the light went on, because I don't know, it's been 8-9 months. I'd been talking about it when I was doing a lot of discussion on the supercomputer, and there were crop circles that were allowing me to basically talk in the way that I was talking, because it was showing certain things. But I contended that the supercomputer that's generating all this code is manipulating 3 timelines, 2 of which it planned on doing 911 events in order to learn from these 2 false flag events, so that it could perfect its 3rd timeline necessary for them, or for the supercomputer, to achieve this one world government, New World Order timeline. Now, I've been saying that for a long time. It's been a while since I've talked supercomputer and timeline manipulations, the 2 and 1 factor, because once again, the 2-1 code pretty much began when these 3 timelines were shown to us in crop circles. And because the 3 timelines were always shown in this 1-2 or 2-1 pattern, it's what allowed me to realize that 2 timelines, and because even the crop circles showed us 911 coded with 2 of the 3. It was always 2 911 events. And because of that, I was always puzzled over what 2 dates in the future could the New World Order be planning 911 false flag events. Now, I've always kept that in the back of my mind, but here recently, the supercomputer and the New World Order, has pretty much made it easy for anybody to discern what I'm getting ready to discuss here. That 923, 924 are in fact bona fide 911 dates, not because MrCati says so, but because the code that I just show you, 923, 924, adds to 5 and 6, which adds to 11, ergo 911 for these 2 dates. Now, I would also tell you that recently in a crop circle we saw the emphasis on 924. Of course, it showed us 921, 923, but on the 924, it showed us a 1900. And if you recall, I told you 1900 is military time for 7 o'clock. Now, 7 o'clock. Now, I presumed it to be 7 p.m., okay, just because of some other things that I'm not going to get into. But when I was preparing my final chart that I'm going to show you, I looked into a number of things, moon phases, various elements that I believe are included in any ritual such as this, as big as it is. There were certain things that would come into play. And because I recalled in my own mind, back to 2012, the Summer Olympics in London, that was a big conspiratorial event. They had big plans for that, but it didn't go down the way they wanted it to, because too many things were exposed. But I discovered, as part of many videos that I did in the lead up to the London Summer Olympics, that I found that, the Colosseum that they built special was a ritually designed building, imbued with all kinds of code, because back then we were transitioning between Ritual Code 13 into Ritual Code 7. Now, it was late in many of those videos dealing with the 2012 London Summer Olympics that's when I discovered, when I took in sunset, I realized, because of the coding that I discovered up to that point, that they had coded the transition between Ritual Phase 13 into 7 minutes before sunset. 7 minutes before sunset was when the ritual handoff took place. And because sunset is being used in the ritual, I had to consider it as part of what's before us. And so when I did, and noticed that sunset on 9/24 is at 7:11, I said, wow, there's the 7-11 or 77 combination. But if they do their deed at 7 p.m. on 9/24, whatever the event is for 924 is separate from 923. Let's get that straight. 923 is its own false flag. Could be anything. 924, it showed us a time of 1900, which is 7 o'clock. The fact that sun sets at 7:11 on that day. Also, it's the 267th day of the year, and 2 plus 6 is 8, and 7 adds to 15, which is in play. Okay, so the fact that the sun sets at 7:11, and the fact that a crop circle showed us the time of 1900. Now, if you're not getting this, you need to. Because if you don't believe anything, you ought to at least jot it down and make a note of it. Because that's what I do. I don't believe everything that I see, but I make note of it because they're showing it to us for a reason. Now, I needed to point this out to you, the 7:11 sunset time frame, the fact that 924 is separate from 923, and that each date, 923 and 924, are in my mind possible 911 false flag event dates that we've been more or less alluded to for many, many months now, especially when I was talking about the supercomputer and the 2-in-1 two timelines being manipulated to achieve the third perfect timeline. That's what the supercomputer is trying to do. It's cheating, using time manipulation to do so. Now, I needed to point this out to you as a build-up, and so now that you've seen this material here, let's go into chart number 3. Okay, moving right along. This is chart number 3. Now, once again, just as a rehash, just so that in case you're puzzled, I'm showing you some things that I didn't have the room or the means to show you on the final chart. These are things that are kind of like it's things you need to be aware of. But okay. In previous videos, going back to Pope Francis, the Washington visit, the Earth Grid Ley Lines, the special 5-sided area that I stated I believed was created over many hundreds of years by the Jesuit Order. It brought the Jesuit Order in relationship to the Pope into the discussion. And I did a number of videos discussing these things, but because I did, once again, there is a subcode in things relative to the Jesuit Order and Pope Francis, or more specifically the Roman Catholic Church with previous popes. Because what I had reported on, which is in my reports for review, was that the Jesuit Order was primarily created by a group of men, 7 men, in 1534. Now, as you can see, 1 and 5 adds to 6, 3 and 4 adds to 7, 6 and 7 adds to 13. Now, okay. I then noted Pope Paul III, the Roman Catholic Church, in the year 1540, officially legitimized the Jesuit Order. And so, 1540. 15 is, of course, 6. 40 is 4. 6 plus 4 is 10. I noted that 10 and 13 adds to 23. Now, I said, well, man, this is this may go over the heads of many people. You're looking at it and you probably don't understand what it infers, what it suggests, because you see, 23 has been a key date. 23 has been a key number. Now, we've seen 23 associated with 24, but we know 23 is a key date, Day of Atonement, okay? But nonetheless, 23 has been a highlighted number. And the fact that the Jesuit Order, because these are things that occurred this is ancient history. This code is in ancient history events that the Jesuit Order and the Pope, or the Roman Catholic Church, are both associated with. Because for the Jesuit Order to have been created in 1534 and to show a code in the date or the year of 13, and then to see that Pope Paul III, when he legitimized the Jesuit Order in 1540, that code adds to 10, and the 13 and 10 adds to 23. This is like looking back in history, and of course we have the comfort of knowing what history is about, because we can go back and look at any period between 1534 and current date, to realize that these two dates 6 years apart in the year 1500, for them to add to 23, if you think that's a coincidence, no, I'm sorry, it's not. But I needed to show you this because, well, I need to move into that next chart, and then you'll understand why all of this material will hopefully come together, and you'll understand the bigger picture that I'm trying to paint you. So with that being in mind, I needed to show you this only because it's the Jesuit Order and Pope Paul, or more or less the date of when the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Paul III, legitimized the Jesuit Order. Now, I would tell you, I didn't put it in this chart, but I need to mention it. The Jesuit Order was created on August the 15th, 815. Now, the Pope Paul III established the Jesuit Order officially on September 27th. Now, August 15th and September 27th have to be considered in the scheme of things, but there's a reason for it. You see, because this is the much bigger picture, and the much bigger picture has many, many elements of a conspiracy in it. We got Jade Helm, we got CERN, we got Obama, the Pope Francis, we got Zionism, ISIS. We got a slew of things that are all coming together here. And so I need to lay this out so that when I get to the final talking chart, these things will hopefully be in the back of your head, and the final chart will make more sense to you. Now, I needed to show you this. I've shown it to you. Let's go on to the next chart. Okay, final chart. Final chart begins like this. As you can see, because we're still in the month of June, and here in, almost a couple of weeks, 6/21. 6/21. The number 21 is associated with Prince William because it's his birthday, 6/21. Now, that's a royal event, and this is what I want to say about the royals. When I showed you the code 921, 923, 924, and showed you how those 6 digits added to 14, which equated to the 21. 14 being for the Queen, the Royal Cabal, and the royals primarily. It was to basically show that if in fact there is a ritual for the prince, any of the princes, they're going to be separate from the 911 events that are going to occur later. A 911 event is much separate from a ritual offering, a ritual sacrifice. However, a 911 event can be all of that rolled into one. But 6/21 is associated with Prince William being born. Now, next item up, 7/15. Now, before I move on to 7/15, I would tell you we did see 6/21 in Google Doodle codes for a number of times. So 6/21 is highlighted here not just because it's Prince William's birthday, but because 6/21 was officially highlighted for us to consider in the code. So I had to because the only thing that's key for that particular date, now aside from being Prince William's birthday, I believe it's Father's Day. So, okay, 7/15. Now 7/15 is when we're told Jade Helm officially begins. But I know, because I'm aware, that many people like myself believe that Jade Helm has actually already begun, and that it's in various stages depending on where you are. Now, I pretty much was probably the first to say it, and I put it in my first video or a video regarding Jade Helm, that when I studied the map, the big map that everybody refers to with regard to Jade Helm, I noted that the map, because of the code and some things that I observed, I knew that the map was probably much bigger. But it stood to reason that they're not going to show the entire map for the entire operation, because that would alarm and alert people much more so than Jade Helm has already done so. Now, the fact that people now believe that Jade Helm is expanding into other states, well, I believe that. I really do, because I believe it. The map was always much bigger than what we were shown. Okay, now, with that regard, here's an item of discussion. We're told in the media that Colorado and the governor of Colorado opted out of Jade Helm. Now you go look it up. That's what we're told. And of course, everybody hears that and gets all, yeah, one for America, go team USA. No, it's bullshit. And I'll tell you why. Now, he may have opted out of Jade Helm and made a big media deal out of it when all the hype was going on about Jade Helm in Texas. But let's not forget, we got the Stryker Raider force of 4,000 troops with Abrams and those fast mobile vehicles. 4,000 troops, which is comparable to 2 divisions worth of troops that are in Colorado. So while you may hear Colorado opted out of Jade Helm, that's BS, because there's over 4,000 troops right there right now moving in and positioning all over Colorado. For what? Well, I think there's a couple of two key elements to consider. One, first and foremost, is the Denver International Airport and its massive underground secret complex. Now, if it's key to the New World Order, obviously many elements of our government have been moving to Colorado. Many parts of New York and Wall Street are moving things out to Colorado. And so I believe that these 4,000 troops that aren't called part of Jade Helm, that's why, the governor, he can beat his chest. I opted out of Jade Helm. Yeah. Well, that's just a bunch of crap. Okay? It's eye candy to make you go back to sleep. Because if you would have paid attention to those 4,000 troops that are running around in Colorado, you'd have had to say, wait a minute. If he opted out of Jade Helm, then why do we have 4,000 troops running around Colorado? Now, that's a question you need to ask. But because of the way they define things or name things or classify things, see, this Raider Stryker force is not officially to us part of Jade Helm, but it is in secret. Now, I had to mention that to you because you see, 715 Jade Helm, people think it's beginning. Well, I think it's already begun, and it's begun across the nation in many states that weren't included in the original Jade Helm PDF map that everyone shows, where Texas was hostile, etc., etc. Now, okay. Now, 715, aside from the fact that Jade Helm begins this date, even though I know I've stated I believe it's already begun, but they claim it's going to begin on 715, so I'll highlight the date because that's what they claim. I note this because, you see, 715 happens to be a new moon. Now, a new moon is the dark moon, and the new moon is normally when rituals are when they're conducted. Okay, certain groups will use the moons for their ritual sacrifices, and it's ordinarily always the blackest moon, which is a new moon, because there is no moon there. Now, 715 just happens to be a new moon, and it happens to be, supposedly, according to their report, when Jade Helm begins. Okay? Now, 722. Let's move on. 722 happens to be Prince George's birthday. Another royal birthday. And so, once again, if we see any form of ritual, sacrifice, or event, it's going to be minor in scale to anything of a 911 event. People dying or some disaster that occurs that looks like some disaster that kills a number of people in the proper timing to these events are ritual sacrifices, blood being offered for honor or to show some form of something to the person whose birthday it is, which in this case, 722, would be Prince George. Now, moving right along, August 15th. This is like I told you, when the Jesuit Order was established in 1534. And what are the odds that this year, on this August 15th, it's a new moon, the dark moon. And buddy, don't they have a black pope? Well, they're going to move on a black moon, all right. And so I needed to show you this because it's something you need to see. Now, next date up, 9/11. Next item up is 9/11. Now, we're told that Jade Helm in Florida ends on 9/11. But to have 9/11 in the mix, well, it's kind of interesting because, you see, while officially, the new moon is listed as 9:15, 9/11, technically it's in a new moon, varying degrees as it's moving into its final, like 1% of illumination or less. And so 9/11 technically is within the window of new moon dates. But anyway, 9/11 is when we're told Jade Helm ends in Florida. Okay, now 9/15. Now 9/15 is a new moon, and this is when we're told that officially Jade Helm 15 ends. But I want to point something out to you that's an observation that I made, and it got me to thinking. Because you see, there's so many things to consider. I merely have to throw this out to you as something to consider. Now, 9/15 happens to be Prince Harry's birthday. Another Prince birthday, 9/15. But aside from the fact that it's also Prince Harry's birthday, a royal birthday, 9/15 happens to be when the 70th United Nations General Assembly convenes. It's when they get together, kind of like when they open their session. Now, there's many dates within their session, and each date various itinerary and things are going to be done. And as we're told, Pope Francis on the 25th is supposedly set to address the UN General Assembly in New York City. Okay, now, I tell you this because 9/15, we're told that Jade Helm ends. And yet, I saw that the UN United Nations General Assembly convenes. And I got to thinking, could this be in any way signifying or alluding to a transfer of military power or authority from the military to the United Nations? I said, well, maybe, something I've got to consider. So because I've got to consider it, I've got to throw it out there, and I've got to explain why. Why? Because for the UN General Assembly to be convening, to be coming into session, into their legitimate power on the 15th, the same day that Jade Helm supposedly ends, I saw this connection as authority. Authority over what? Over military forces that are going to be all over the United States by this time because, well, they're still deployed, And so, anyway, I needed to point this out to you. Let's move right along. Oh, and did I mention 9/15 is also a new moon? Okay, 9/21. Now, 9/21 begins a window of 7 days that involves Pope Francis and or Obama, but primarily Pope Francis. We're told that on 9/21, Pope Francis is going to depart to come this way to visit the United States and Obama and do a number of things. We're told that 9/21 is when Pope Francis begins his visit. But please note, 9/21 is also World Peace Day. I said, man, okay, something to note. 9/23. 9/23 is when we're told that Pope Francis is going to meet with Obama in Washington, D.C. Now, next date, 9/24, Obama and Pope Francis, where Pope Francis will address the United States Congress. Now, these two dates, 9/23, 9/24, are as far as I believe it's going to go. The schedule beyond these two dates is so iffy that I just, because obviously if there are 9/11 events on the 23rd and the 24th, and if the 24th is much more of a natural disaster, an asteroid impact into the Atlantic that creates a massive tsunami that inundates the Gulf Coast, the East Coast, and the coasts of the rest of the nations across the world, then it's going to be pretty serious. Yeah, that's going to be a game changer for all of us. Okay? The gravy train's going to be over. It's going to be life in the jungle for those that survive. Because you see, if you survive the blast and the tsunami, probably, I'm going to tell you right now, very few people ever talk about it, but if you consider yourself lucky to have survived a 9,000 degree heat blast from the initial impact, and if you're lucky to survive a 1,000-foot high tsunami wave traveling at 1,000 miles an hour, well, if you're lucky to survive, you stand a very high probability of being injured. And if you don't have a means to treat your injuries, if you don't have first aid equipment, if you don't have specific drugs, antibiotics, the things in the medical area, gauzes, tapes, things to do stitching, because you see, in this world of survivors, your survival is going to begin the moment you realize you didn't die. But you probably realize, man, I'm messed up, because if you're close enough to the event, you're going to be messed up. But if you live, you're going to be wounded or injured to some, and you're going to come across people that are. And for those that aren't going to be able to treat the most simplest of wounds, you're going to die from those wounds. Infection will set in, and then it's just going to be a matter of time until you die. Now, I mention this because you see, 9/23, 9/24, while these are the two dates that I firmly believe are the 9/11 false flag event days, 9/11 on the 23rd could be anything. Hoover Dam, St. Andreas Fault, New Madrid Fault, Yellowstone. It could be ISIS nuclear terror on any of those Walmart stores or locations. It could be an invasion. It could be any number of things that happen on 9/23. But it's going to be separate from what happens on 9/24. And we've been told in many prophecies going back many years, going back into the 80s, of a prophesized asteroid impact that would occur in the Atlantic Ocean on 9/24, somewhere east of Puerto Rico, there in the Caribbean. And of course, that would immediately kill over 20 million people in Florida, because Florida is basically, it's not very high above ground. There are no high spots in Florida. And so any 1,000-foot tsunami wave traveling at 1,000 miles is going to wash over Florida like it wasn't even there. And if you're in Florida and think you're going to hold on to something or float till you get to the other side, you're delusional. Because like I said, if you're that close, the blast 9,000 degrees will probably fry you. And if you're lucky to have survived that blast, the tsunami wave is going to kill you. So I'm telling you these things because, see, on these two dates, 9/23, 9/24, the false flag events are plentiful. But for 9/24, asteroid impact. Now, what Obama and the Pope do in the special ritual zone that they're in, that was created by the Jesuit orders, is very, very important. Because, you see, they're in a ritually designed area that the Jesuits created over time. These cities are there because of some Jesuit influence. And so now, hundreds of years later, for the Pope Francis, who's a Jesuit, first Jesuit Pope, for him to be visiting Washington, D.C., and to be inside a five-sided Pentagon area with Obama in a location that's related to the Earth Grid Ley Lines, that refers to some form of hidden Earth energy that is either augmented, used, or energized by what CERN is doing to create some form of temporal illusion, time manipulation, or some kind of temporal time displacement for given areas based on what CERN infuses or how it uses that energy. Now, that's part of the master conspiracy, but so many things could happen on two key dates. I now realize that those two key dates, 23 and 24, were the two dates that we should have associated 9/11 false flag events with. And since 9/24 is already associated with an asteroid impact, it doesn't mean that ISIS couldn't do something that day, that an invasion couldn't begin that day, that global conflict between Russia, China, other nations couldn't begin that day. Might even begin the day before. And because we still have the possibility of a financial economic collapse. Like I said before, if something of an asteroid does impact on the 24th, that in essence will end our financial system as we know it. But okay. Now, moving right along. Now I don't know, in my mind, I don't know how the next dates could even occur if in fact 9/23, 9/24 are used in the way that the code has suggested, 9/11 events, especially with 9/24 and this massive tsunami and ELE event for the world. I don't know how, because, well, with Washington, New York City, Philadelphia, I would tell you that those areas that are all within this 5-sided Pentagon area it may be a ritual zone because of these Earth grid ley lines, but because of its proximity to the coast, New York City, Philadelphia, even Washington could very well be inundated with the tsunami wave if in fact there is an impact in the Atlantic on 9/24. So the fact that Pope Francis is with Obama, is it so they can go into their secret tunnel and secret bunker and be whisked away? I don't know. Because if in what he addresses, I mean, if something happens on 9/23, it could influence what he says on 9/24. I mean, simply. And I got to thinking, if something happens 9/21 of a emergency or something that begins events, then his meeting with Obama and his itinerary for the address to the U.S. Congress could be affected. But I realize that 9/23, 9/24, if either of those two dates indeed have a serious 911 major false flag event, that what happens on 9/25 may not ever occur. Because if, New York City's underwater, you can't have a General Assembly and Pope addressing the UN if everything's underwater. Now, and the world's in a state of emergency and chaos because, chaos is going to bring a lot of things. And so I got to thinking maybe that's where Pope Francis and Obama want to be when the chaos begins. But why are they together? I've had many discussions, because if indeed the Pope is some higher demonic element that's possessed by something moving around looking like the Pope Francis, then he's meeting with Obama to do what? To transfer his demonic element over into Obama, and then Obama takes over from that point? I mean, there's all kinds of things I've been given thought to, but if in fact Pope Francis gives a speech to Congress, I'm curious what he's going to address, and because I don't believe these events are going to occur the way they're planned, I have to kind of be a little narcissistic and skeptical about the fact that I just don't think there's going to be a 9/25 General Assembly speech by the Pope in New York City because it's going to be underwater, and the world would have changed on the 24th. Now, 9/26, 9/27. 9/26, 9/27 is when Pope Francis supposedly visits Philadelphia. But I would tell you, Philadelphia is going to be underwater too, or inundated with the remnants of a tsunami wave, depending on how far inland it goes. But if it's a big asteroid impact, as they're claiming or prophesizing it's going to be, Philadelphia could be underwater. So there won't be any visit to Philadelphia. But yet, Pope Francis is in Washington, and he was scheduled to visit Philadelphia. And let's say, hypothetically, that nothing happens and he does visit Philadelphia. The only thing that would be key about this is that on the 27th is the historic date that the Pope Paul III established the Jesuit Order in 1540. And so for the Black Pope, who's a Jesuit, to be in Philadelphia or in close proximity to Philadelphia on 9/27, you see where I'm going with this? It's subtle, but you can't ignore it. Okay, now, I then had to also construe this code that was in the 1534 and 1540 in the Jesuit Order and the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church establishing the Jesuit Order, the code that added to 23. Now, that puts the 23rd as an emphasis in my mind. The 24th is an emphasis because of the asteroid impact and how that, if that occurs, everything's going to change. But, there's also another factor, and that is Nibiru, Planet X, whatever's in the sky that's coming closer, that could be bringing with it asteroids that are going to impact. And so the 911 event on the 23rd, or for that matter on the 21st, or for that matter back as far as 9/15, okay, could be disclosure about this large object in space that's going to influence our Earth. And, I would tell you, for those of you that watched Deep Impact, the movie, they held a lottery for the citizens. Of course, anybody over 50 wasn't, considered. And so they learn from these movies, because they throw certain things into the movies that, of course, they realize later in the aftermath, in retrospect, aren't going to work. They're not going to inform the public of any incoming asteroid impact into the ocean, or any large Nibiru-sized planet, 4 times the size of planet Earth, that could potentially create a magnetic reversal or pole shift or crustal displacement. And because those events themselves are major, okay, those are major ELEs if that happens. And so, because you have to keep Planet X, Nibiru, something in space, in relationship to this calendar of events that I'm showing you here, it's like CERN. It's not on here, but CERN has to be considered in the mix, because they're playing during this time frame too. So even though CERN, I didn't incorporate the CERN schedule into this, if you did, you might then also see that, well, because you see, CERN to me is, I believe, the player that's making certain things happen that makes us believe that it happened. It's time splicing, altering time, but the fact that 923 and 924, I believe, are the 2 false flag events that are going to be generated in order to help create the New World Order's 3rd timeline, that's what's key about this. But okay, now, final item. We're told that at the end of the day, 9/27, if the schedule goes as designed, that Pope Francis is due to depart late on the 27th, and technically he would be departing on the blood moon, which is 9/28. And that there's a 7-day window that begins 9/21, that runs through 9/28. Now, with so many things in the mix here, you can see this is a big enchilada. It's got a lot of stuffing, lots of cheese in here, okay? And yeah, it's got some meat too. Chicken or beef, your choice. And the choice, I believe, is going to come on 9/23, 9/24. And because you see, if the Pope and Obama collectively do some kind of disclosure about aliens, and that they're going to save us from this asteroid impact and destroy it, so that they are proving their benevolence to us, this is where, you see, there's so much to consider. Like I said, my brain lately has been about to explode, because I get off into some thought processes about things that are real, that are going on today. And yeah, it boggles my mind. And when I combine these other things in here, it kind of paints a picture towards a direction. And while it may not be at this moment crystal clear, this chart to me at least defines it and lays it out in some way that allows me to visualize and to conceptualize the dates and the events of the plethora of conspiracies here: Jesuits, CERN, planets, Nibiru, Obama, Pope, UN, riots in Baltimore. And once again, isn't Baltimore on that main Grid Ley Line coming off that major node that runs down directly into Washington, which is right there near the Pentagon? That's why the Baltimore riots are part of a manipulation. It's a false flag being used to generate and do the things that it's doing in the race relations area. But that's okay. It's just part of what's in play. And the fact that it's within this special zone that Pope and Obama are going to be in, that's what's even more important, because that special zone in Earth Grid Ley Lines are linked to CERN. And that's I guess because, when you think about it, you don't know, well, what is CERN doing it, and how are they doing it? Everyone, I'm sure, would ask that question. And since I can't effectively explain it any better than anybody else, I'm just going to tell you it's probably in one of those realm of discussions that I don't believe anybody has the expertise to discuss, and they're not going to discuss it with us. But anyway, there's not going to be a lottery. There's not going to be any public notification of the impending disaster. They're going to let the disaster occur, and then they're going to go martial law, national emergency, and that's when all the in-game scenarios could begin. Dissidents, roundups, Christians, guillotines, death camps, all the things that everyone, because without internet, without power, electricity, in a world of chaos, and let's say nuclear bombs have gone on across the nation. You see, if I got to thinking, if they wanted to disguise the asteroid impact, and make you believe that it was a global nuclear attack, they would need smaller nuclear attacks across the nation to convince you of that false flag. But anyway, this is what I wanted to mention in terms of the schedule, and it's time that you give it some thought. And I would tell you that the Pope would be departing on a full moon. Now, he comes in, 9/21 begins the first quarter, but it runs 7 days into the full moon, which is 9/28, which is that blood moon. So, now, do with this what you want. I'm not selling anything. I'm not trying to make believers. These are bona fide facts and some other elements that I've thrown in as discussion that needs to be heard.